And you know, Carole, I think so many people get their interest in history by an experience like that at a cemetery or a graveyard. Just asking the question, who was this person? What happened? How can I continue to honor them? You mentioned a little thing in that story, which was a big thing. And you said when you wrote a little book, helped write a little book. Was that the Palmetto, A Town and Its History book?
Yes, it was.
Tell me about your experience with that.
Well, a young couple that grew up, I went to school with Teresa and Tom Doherty, were members of this organization that went to these different communities to get these history books written and told, and they let the families in the area write their own story and turn it in, and you was limited to what you could say. And they got the book together. It took about a year and a half, and we got it together. And they named it Palmetto, A Town and Its People. And during that time, I went to Atlanta and talked to Mr. Timmons and his good friend, who was the head of the Atlanta Historical Society, and asked him if he would come and be a speaker at the Menifee program, and he said he would. And that's when we had to get everything organized and get Mr. Timmons to get all the families okay about it. Mr. Timmons moved from the Atlanta area down to Ormond Beach, Florida, and he passed away right after that, but he was a real nice man, and we took several ladies that went to church with his aunts to go to the History Center and meet him. And he was really nice to me. He said, we were trying to work on another article, which didn't have anything to do with this, but it was about a lynching that took place in Palmetto in 1899. We couldn't get any real stories about it, and he asked me what year it was, and I told him, and he said, well, come on back here. We have every newspaper that's ever been published in the Atlanta area, and I'm sure we'll have the story. So he carried me back to the storage room, and it was like walking into a museum. Everything that had ever been donated for display was there. And he went to the newspaper section and said, tell me now what year, and he found the year, and he said what month, and he found 1899 in the month, and there were page after page of articles about that story. So that's how we got that.
So the Palmetto, A Town and Its People, has become the go-to little book. It's not really a little book. It's a wonderful book. There's a foreword with history sections of the town, and then family contributions for each family member that was interviewed.
Yeah,
it's tremendous.
That was a wonderful time for me, because we got a friend of mine that grew up with me that was a teacher, and a man that went to Palmetto Baptist. His name was George Herndon, I believe.
Yes.
And he helped us to go through the stories and correct everything that needed to be corrected. And that was so much fun to me. I enjoyed so much of that.
And now there's a resurgence in Palmetto. Of course, you live in Chattahoochee Hills, which was unincorporated Palmetto, but there's a resurgence in Palmetto. We have a new mayor. And Susan was telling us at lunchtime about a new initiative to take pictures and do some history project. What's that about, Susan?
It's called Palmetto Portraits, and it's, I forget the guy's name. I'm terrible with names. Hey!
Oh, come in, Lisa. This is my daughter, Lisa.
So it's called Palmetto Portraits, and this guy is used to be with the New York Times photographer.
Oh my!
And he's bought a house in Palmetto, and he is trying to do a pictorial history of Palmetto, and I've been a part of it. but he's wanted to meet some of the historians, so I had told him about you, and we might be coming down here to see you, so
Oh,
he can come
wonderful.
take you and Woody's
Yeah, that's wonderful.
portrait. But it's Palmetto is turning. It's going to revitalize. You can see it happening. We were talking about how even on Church Street we had so many vacant houses, and now everything is being remodeled, redone. The house prices are really going up, but there is a resurgence in the pride of Palmetto. It seems like both sides of town are coming together, and
That's
that's
right.
not happened in a long
That's
time.
right. No, it hasn't. And if I can insert this, I had a meeting down at the History Center in Palmetto one night to do some research on something I was working on. It was I'm being slow with remembering things. It was the black family that I did all the history on.
Is it
It was-
Kennedy?
No, it was Jefferson.
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 Yes, Jefferson.
And there was several black families came to that meeting, and we were discussing the town and how things have changed. And this man spoke up and said, "Well, when I was a little boy, and he wasn't an old fellow then, I never went and walked on the main street. I never came under that railroad track because I knew that was two separate worlds." And I said, "You mean you never walked?" He said, "No, ma'am, I never came to the town, but how it has changed.
It really is
It's
changing.
lots better, more congeniality with everybody."
Well, we were saying too at lunchtime that African American history of the people in this area is sparse.
Mm-hmm.
But you've done a really good job of highlighting a couple of families like that with the Jefferson family. And then I also remember at maybe the Hutchinson Ferry Park opening where the family came
Yeah.
for one of, was that the Jefferson family
Yeah,
that came?
was Inez.
Inez. Yeah.
Inez was one of the great granddaughters of that family, and she never married. And she told me so many things about Mama Edie, as they called her, and how she was responsible. Inez was responsible for me even having pictures. I had a picture of Mama Edie standing with all of her grandchildren at a school. And they lived on the Levi Ballard farm. And when he found out the school was having some get together, he got a man to come down and take a picture of all the school children. And Mama Edie found out about it, and she grabbed her purse and her coat, and she went flying up to the school so she could get a picture of all of her grandchildren. And he took a picture of her standing there with all of them. And Inez just happened to have that. Inez was like 5 or 6 years old. And she let me borrow it and have a copy of it.
So you've lived through quite a history of your own, having been in the mill and grown up in the mill town in Palmetto, then Main Street, then in Chattahoochee Hills, unincorporated,
Yeah,
and then living through the incorporation of our city.
yeah.
So I know that you've been good friends with Steve and Marie Nygren through the years and have helped them with the history of their property as
Yeah.
well. Can you speak to anything about any way that you helped them solve their history? I know there was a milk barn on their property.
There were several barns on their property, and one of the larger barns was right in the back of the house. And they decided when they found the property and bought it, they would just live in that barn. And it was a 2-story barn, and they hired decorators to come, and they had 3 little girls. And when you drove up back there were 3 Barbie doll convertibles parked at the back door. And they built a bedroom upstairs large enough for all 3 of those little girls to be in one room. And it was a great time for them and for all of us too. And they let us come and see what was going on. And they just revitalized that whole section out there. And I was so fascinated with the things that they were able to come up and do, because some of those things I'd never heard of. like getting a decorator to come down and remodel
Fix a
it.
barn.
Or live in a barn. That was a new thing. Who wanted to live in
Reupholster
a
the
barn?
old furniture.
Right.
I just thought it was great.
Right.
Yeah.
And Steve and Marie were great too. Steve had a real love of the history of the land. He loved the land. And anything he could purchase, he bought it. And he started out, I think, with about 600 acres. And now he's probably got,
It's over 1,000, I
well,
think.
it's more like 2,000.
Yeah, yeah.